Hey guys, this is Leeza and I'm so happy to have Paromita Vohra on the channel with me today. She's someone I've looked up to forever. She is a filmmaker, writer, columnist, and just one of my favorite voices on all things love and sex and gender, all my favorite topics. So it's an honor to have you here, Paro. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And today we're going to be talking about singlehood, what it means to be single, and why collectively we need to rethink singlehood. So, Paro, we talked briefly when we'd met, and you told me that the concept of marriage just never really resonated with you, and you kind of quite deliberately chose at a young age that you would not be operating within this societal imperative to get married. Can you talk to me about that?
Well, I mean, obviously when you're young, you think in far greater absolutes than you do as you go through life and you learn other things. But I think when I said at a young age, I'm never going to get married, it was more like a pushback against the idea that marriage is a kind of final goal, and that is something that you have to inevitably do. And I think it was a useful way to think about life for me at that time. I mean, today I don't feel that people, I never felt that other people shouldn't get married, and I think some people want to get married or whatever, but the idea that marriage is the only manner in which people can experience intimacy, first of all, that marriage is the only way in which people can be respected, and that especially for women, this idea that if you're not married, somehow there's something wrong with you. There's a lot of anxiety for women if they don't end up getting married, or at least in a long-term relationship. So I do think that some of it was a way to not be bogged down by this idea that your life is not successful if you don't get married, and to allow yourself, at least to allow myself, the freedom to just follow some path and figure out my own self rather than just meet a series of goalposts. I think that's what I was thinking at that time. You often hear people saying that agar shaadi ho jayegi to sab theek ho jayega. Like shaadi is a panacea for all problems, and you're also made to therefore think, like a lot of women think when they are seeing men, that if he marries you or if he chooses you to be his wife, that means he actually loves you and actually accords you respect. But we all know from the way that marriages turn out that there's no guarantee of respect just because there is an institution you walk into. There's respectability, but respectability is not the same thing as actually respecting each other.
I do think there's still this idea that a relationship is only valuable if it leads to something, or there's this sort of premium placed on longevity, as if something temporary or fleeting or something that just didn't work out is suddenly a waste of your time, or devoid of any value, or or regrettable.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something that needs to change. Why does a relationship have to be a means to an end, right?
Yeah, I think that emotional spaces are so vulnerable for all of us, and they're amorphous, and so much is unspoken. People do fear that, and really the idea of marriage or longevity or choosing each other for a long time, it's tangible, it's external, it's something you can say that, yeah, it's there. So in fact, it masks a lot of other insecurities sometimes that people are not really working through. So I think the other thing which happens is it's not like women alone are conditioned to think this. Men also are conditioned in that same way. So there has been this very, I feel I've been hearing it forever and ever, this division about, there's one kind of girl you marry and another kind of girl you do things with, whatever that means, right? So this hierarchy of respect does exist within the mindset of men, and so it becomes a kind of violent interplay, right? Like women are feeling not respected. There is no language of respect for relationships that don't yet have a name. And because of that, there is a fear of being in a situation which is not immediately named. But actually to get to know somebody and to really explore a relationship for some time, we have to be in a place where it's not named because we don't yet know what it is, right? So I know that it's very difficult because it's a double bind, because on the one hand, we'll have to do that in order to arrive at a place where we really have experienced diverse relationships. And because we have experienced them, we are willing to recognize that they exist and then to accept them and respect them. But I think like human vulnerability, social conditioning, the absence of conversations all become a kind of dense cocktail which makes us feel insecure and fearful that we are being disrespected or we are not valued, because we cannot name our relationship and there is no linearity to the way something is happening. There's no progression. That said, I think, it's on the one hand, there is an idea that we should be able to respect every relationship no matter what it is. But that comes from the idea that we should respect every human being no matter what our relationship to them, right? And there are so many ideas of caste and gender and class tied up in the way that we behave towards others. So at some level, the horrible answer to what seems to be a simple question is we have to change everything. We have to be willing to change ourselves and our attitude to others. But in a way, larger social change and the change in intimate life come hand in hand. One thing changes the other, right?
So true, so true. You know, we're fed from pop culture and romantic novels and just these, I don't know, the commercialization of romance really. This idea of the one and that your life isn't complete till you find the one. And somehow that singlehood is an incomplete state, you know, or an inadequate or pathetic, or you're a loser if you're single. I mean, the word spinster is such a loaded word with such negative connotations. And I feel like that's another thing that collectively we need to unlearn, right? Why are we incomplete on our own? Why are we looking for something in someone else that's so parasitic almost?
I mean, there is a sense of something parasitical or unhealthy in the idea that you need somebody else to complete you. Maybe, I don't know. But I think the really interesting thing is that when we say single, we always attach it to women. Like, we don't really talk about single men as a thing, as a phenomenon, as something to think about. Are men choosing not to marry, and what is the impact of that on them?
I think that, but there is a pressure, right? Even on Indian men at least, on all Indian young people to get married.
There is India is definitely a very marriage-heavy society. But what I'm saying is that when we talk about singleness, we talk about it as a female state. That women who are single is a matter of conversation for us. Men who are single is not a topic of conversation for us, right? And that in itself points to something about that idea of incompleteness, which is that women by themselves are not enough. Just to be somebody is not enough. So supposing, like, I don't know if I think of myself as a single woman. I don't know exactly what that label means. I happen to be not married. But the thing is that all of these kind of templates come along with the idea of a single woman, right? And so because the idea is that, oh, nobody chose you to marry, or you're so particular that you're too picky, and that's why you can't find anybody. And that if you don't marry somebody, or if you're not with the same person for like 25 plus years, then there is you're going to end up being a crotchety spinster who doesn't like anybody or anything.
Stereotype. I'm happy to be a cat lady.
I have neither cats nor dogs. I have plants, and they're all flowering quite well. They flower better when I'm in town than when I'm out of town, so I guess they love me. But I think that actually the idea of singleness itself seems to imply that there is an actually correct state, and that state is coupled upness, right? So I think there's a response to that people make. Like, suddenly you have also this notion of the happy single woman who's all the time having fun, who's on eternal adventures, and who's always traveling and so free-spirited, right? Which I also think it's a kind of oppressive idea, because all human beings in all states are sometimes happy and sometimes sad. To be single, and I'm using the term in a very broad way, it has great things, right? Like, there's so much time to develop yourself, to learn new things. Even in some of the difficulties of being single, there is so much space to question yourself and therefore to grow. There are also so many difficult things about being single. One of them is that courier packages, there's nobody to receive them in the house very often. When you're sick, you may feel a bit down and feel you have no one to heat your dinner for you or whatever. But that's also true of people who are married or people in any other life situation. So actually for me, I think if there were a way in which we would recognize that some people are single, some people are married, some people are single and married in a kind of serialized fashion, and that all stages of life have their sweet and bitter moments, we just, stop thinking about singleness in this as a kind of afflicted state. The idea of the one, like there is only one person who will complete you and you only fall in love one time.
Soulmates.
Yes, soulmates, etc. This is it's a very popular idea, and I've certainly found in many, many years of working, interviewing people across the country, both for my documentaries and for other, like writing about love and relationships, and now with Agents of Ishq, that this is a persistent notion that you fall in. True love only happens once, and worse than that, your first love is your only true love, right? So I think this is so oppressive an idea for people, even though I think, you see popular films in which this notion is perpetuated and overturned. Like one of India's most popular Bollywood films, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, is actually starting with the question, can you fall in love twice? And in fact, people do fall in love twice in that film, right? You fall in love. Fact, right? Yes. So the idea that there's only one love and everything else is kind of secondary or not important, these things are all tied together, right? So it's only, when you stay single longer, that you realize you fall in love over and over again. So I think that the idea will also shift. I must say that I find this idea more frequently expressed by men than by women. That my first love is my only love. And now that my heart has been broken once, I will never ever recover from this heartbreak. And I will be tragically heartbroken forever and treat all women badly thereafter. Because, my emotional virginity I lost to one woman. So I feel like
men are terrible with dealing with rejection, aren't they?
Yeah, so
they're programmed to be bad at it. I mean, they're conditioned to believe they don't deserve to ever be rejected. And it's complicated.
But I mean, the masculine identity is all about you must succeed and you should never take no for an answer. If you're rejected, that means you're a loser. I mean, there are different ways in which rejection operates for men and for women, I think. So yes, certainly it programs men to be not necessarily receptive to what somebody else is saying, and also commensurately to take it very, sometimes violently to themselves and to others when they do face rejection or heartbreak, right? So you do see acid attacks, you do see so much like now doxing and stuff that happens online because men are refusing to take no for an answer and they've been told they mustn't, that masculinity is about never being refused and always being victorious, right? So I think, our ideas of gender are shifting and changing, and with that hopefully our ideas of love, relationships, and who we are as people inside love and relationships will also shift. Yeah.
Now, another aspect I think of the narratives women are fed about, the road to a meaningful life is not just marriage, but also children. So not only are you incomplete if you don't have a spouse, but also if you don't have a family. And that's another thing I think. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. You haven't had children.
No.
And I feel like I even hear women telling me at 28, I'm starting to hear this a lot, like shadi, when are you going to get married? You should have children. Your biological clock is ticking and all of this. And I hear women make this argument that like it's a biological imperative for a woman to have children. Your body is designed for this, beta. Like the part of the reason you as a woman exist is to perpetuate the species. And I mean, I don't know where to begin in trying to dismantle this argument, but I'm just curious,
I mean, like there may be a biological, female bodies may be designed to have children, but bodies are designed for so many things. They're also designed for hard work and people are pretty lazy. So, I think that...
I'm going to use that.
I mean, so I think that there are people who want to have children and there are people who don't want to have children. It's that simple. Many people who wouldn't really, who don't make great parents, didn't really want to be parents, but are parents because that's what you do, right? You get married and then you have kids. You're supposed to have kids. There's so much pressure on people to have children. And that pressure is sometimes internalized as well. So I think that too is shifting, right? You are seeing more people not having children, not having biological children, also adopting children sometimes. Even as alongside you're seeing a lot of new medical work which allows people who otherwise could not have children to get pregnant and have children. So I think it's much more interesting to me is really what does it mean to be watching children grow up, and what are the ways in which we as communities can be involved in the life of children without necessarily having children. Because I think this is a complete misrepresentation that if you don't have children of your own, you are not involved in the lives of children. Because you actually maybe, like I am an aunt, and I'm extremely in love with my niece and also care about what happens to her and think about her future a lot, right? And I feel like there are a number of friends of my sister who are engaged with my niece's life. And this somehow can lighten the load on parents as well today. So the idea that we think about children as being part of society and us involved with the lives of children, no matter whether we have our own children or not, is quite important to me. I definitely think that for me growing up, having diverse role models was great. I mean, I had parents But there were uncles and aunts or people who floated in and out of life who were not married or who had slightly different lives, and that gave you a possibility of thinking of something else. So I think that it's fine. You don't have to have your children. You can be involved in children's lives otherwise also, and children get a lot from seeing people make a variety of life choices and seeing that all of those life choices can be sustainable actually. And at the risk of sounding very schmaltzy, they are sustainable by being open-hearted, by being loving, by having relationships and the vulnerability and difficulty of relationships with a number of types of people, Reducing our relationships to I will get married and have kids and then everything will be perfect is a recipe often for unhappiness and narrow-mindedness. Because what do we want to move towards? We want to move towards a society in which we are loving towards each other per se, where we respect others because they are people, and we take some time to get to know other people, to make ourselves known to people with the hope that there will always be a certain amount of respect and lovingness.
And I mean, I think living with someone forever and just the idea actually of cohabiting a space with someone is a huge challenge. People underestimate how challenging it is. Like before you surrender your solitude and sort of your space forever, I feel like it's amazing to me that so many people are just willing to do that, to go from life as a single person to life as a married person overnight without considering the level of compromise and or change, at least, if that's a kind of word, involved. Yeah. And so I wanted to also just talk about some of the joys of being single, because I feel like we underestimate them and then you can't go back,
Yeah.
So...
Okay, so I mean, the joys of being single are many. Obviously, if you're a person who likes lots of alone time, I think like creating a universe of your own is quite romantic in its own way, right? Because when you're on your own, you have more time to think about what do I like, what do I not like. And there is a certain element of being in a kind of fantasia when you're on your own. There is, I think. And that's why it's so marvelous and poetic at one level. For me, this idea of a room of your own, which Virginia Woolf talks about, has actually been quite important, because I started living on my own when I was 22 and I had a very tiny house in a working class neighborhood. And for me, it still remains, the idea of a house of your own still remains actually every morning like a kind of fantastic thing. It's like a dream that I have a window where I can sit and I look out at the city, and it is actually so beautiful. And I remember that when I first began staying on my own, it was like tiny one-room apartment in tenement building, right? And I felt I was the luckiest girl in the world because I could have a little tiny kitchen, and my friends used to joke, your kitchen is like an airplane cockpit, because I would cook like huge meals for 20 people in that such a tiny kitchen. But just learning to make a house of your own, learning to have domesticity with yourself is also so important an important part of being an adult. That you do it in order to survive, to look after yourself. Actually, it makes you capable of looking after others a little bit more, I think. Whereas so often this idea that you'll get married, you leave your parents' home and get into your marital home is really surviving on the basis of a great gender inequality, isn't it? Because men are not leaving their homes, their parents' homes, and going to their wives' parents' homes, right? It is women who are leaving their homes and having to fit into another person's home. So imagine there are so many people who never known. Some people may not want to know, but there are so many people who've never known what it is to actually have a house of the kind that they want, They always have to fit in with somebody else's way. So it's not always that you cohabit and you do something mutually. It's often very lopsided as well.
That's true.
Yeah. And I think it is very painful. I don't think we recognize fully how painful it must be to leave everything that is familiar to you and have to make a home in a completely different context. There's a very small minority where people are marrying and living just with their partner. Most people in India are marrying and living with other families, right? And I think it's hard.
Women are also made to feel like they are obligated to be selfless. Or the people make the argument that a woman who doesn't want children or who's pursuing her career is a selfish woman. You're a bad wife or a bad representation of womanhood if you reject the idea of being a wife at all, not having children. And this idea that to put your own interests, desires, curiosities, or whatever else above this idea of wifehood and motherhood and all of that. I feel like women are still made to feel fear and shame around doing what they might want to do for themselves over, participating in these expectations.
I mean, I think that's definitely true, right? That it sometimes does feel like everything that women want to do is an extra. That whenever women wish to express themselves or make some choices for themselves, it's immediately categorized as selfish or shallow or vain or some of those things. That said, how much time can you really spend worrying about what other people think about you is what I think. I mean, it maybe used to annoy me when I was very young. I think you have to keep doing what you like. And the nicest thing about doing what you like is you always meet more people like yourself as you go along. And you actually learn that you need to have a new community. The radicalness of your choice remains rooted in the idea that you do what you like to do. You also believe in a certain kind of world. You believe in kindness maybe or lovingness, doing things for each other, not just because you're related to each other or come from the same caste or class, but as a kind of human comradeship, let me say, that friendships are sustaining relationships, that yes,
every person you meet is an opportunity to be kind and vulnerable.
Yeah. So, but what I think is, I mean, another thing is the advantage of being a little bit older is that you've done it long enough, then people stop saying stupid things to you like, oh, you're just flirting with this idea, because how long are you flirting with an idea, right? Like now they start sounding silly. But the better thing is that at least I've seen that many of my relatives who used to joke about me or feel like, pata nahi kya kar rahi hai ye ladki, now actually say they respect what I've done. They respect the life I've made for myself. They're actually quite proud of me. So as life continues and as you are a certain type of person, I think in people's minds around you, the concept of singleness changes. I don't really think that anybody I know closely thinks of me as this kind of single woman.
Right.
I think they just think of me as Paromita now, which is big, huge relief.
Right. But I definitely think that that's a journey, right? You have to prove yourself in a weird sort of way, because the default setting is to look at single people with either pity or curiosity or, it's either it's scandalous or pathetic, or people don't seem to fully believe that you can be single and happy. And that's what I hope that we can sort of question,
Yeah, I think people believe that if you're married, you'll be happy. Even though the evidence is overwhelmingly not corroborating that, right? So already that has been severely challenged. As that gets more and more challenged, I think this idea that if you're single, you're automatically unhappy will also get challenged, right? And then we'll see that whether you're single or married, you make a different life for yourself depending on the other choices you make. Like singleness and marriage are not the choices.
Are not your only choices.
Yeah, and they're not the determining choices of your well-being. Actually,
and happiness.
Yes, your well-being and happiness comes from a series of other choices you're making, actually. So if you don't make those other choices, like inside a marriage, you can choose to be happy by creating space for yourself, by asking for a more mutual kind of relationship than is normally handed down. People do that, right? They redefine the meaning of marriage as they start to think about their happiness. So it's all a complicated set of choices, and that complicated set of choices is called life. It's like moving through life. So yes, I do think that all of these things are changing, but I want to say that it's not that anybody's immune, right? When people talk about you in that way, nobody's immune. It hurts everyone. Everybody internalizes it. You start thinking that way a little bit about yourself as well. You may, for your whole life, experience a certain amount of emotional self-doubt because of it. But I think the bottom line is that you can't really make all your life choices based on what other people are thinking. You're going to do some of that, right? We all do that a little bit, like, oh, what will people think of this, so I won't do that. I fear failure, so I won't do that. I don't want to be rejected, so I won't make X choice. I think we all do some amount of that. But I think in the essence of our lives, we don't have any choice but to be ourselves. Like, who else will we be if not ourselves? So I think you gotta stop depending so much on becoming an adult, is to stop depending on what other people are telling you to do. Even now, sometimes young people will stand up and say, I really want to do X and I really want to do Y, but my parents just don't approve of it. And my answer is always, so what?
Do it.
Do it. I mean, there's no rule that everybody has to agree with you, right? This desire to get everyone to agree with you is also a little bit silly. People aren't going to agree with you. That's okay. They have the right to disagree with you. You have the right to choose what you want. And then somewhere along the way, either you will come to an agreement or you won't. You'll see, right? As women lead very different lives, it also opens up the door for many other people, right? I think that's true of all people who make different choices. That like queer people open up doors to other kinds of choices that people could make, even if they're straight. Say the way you dress or the way you express yourself. Similarly, the fact that women have begun to make very different sets of choices, I think has allowed certain men to also think of choosing differently, to choose to be a different kind of guy, to choose to fall in love with a different kind of woman, and to socially assert that as well. So I think what you're seeing now is like you also see a lot of relationships between older women and younger men, for example. You're seeing a lot of people living together and even telling their parents finally that they live together. So I think all of that is also shifting, and rather than only focus on all the things that don't change, it's important for us to hear more and more narratives of things that are changing.
And a lot is changing.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This was wonderful. You guys, you must subscribe to Agents of Ishq. It's a platform that Paromita has founded, and it seeks to give sex a good name. It's really wonderful content. I'll put a link in the description. I hope you liked this video. Please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up if you did. And of course, please subscribe to my channel. We'll see you next time. Bye.